MLB The Show 24 had another feature premiere highlighting Road to the Show and Franchise. We saw first gameplay of both of these modes, and honestly, they both look pretty good. In this video, we're going to dive straight into it, talking about mostly Franchise and a little bit of the Road to the Show that they presented. They also have new presentations, just graphics in general that they're adding to the game, audios and visuals. I think a lot of these changes are good, but let's get into it. Let's first start with talking about Franchise. So first things first, this is exact Franchise gameplay that you see in the bottom right hand corner is what the scoreboard is going to look like. It looks something kind of similar to what you would see in real life with the team logos and scores. They are implementing the pitch clock, so granted they're hitting here, so you don't typically see the pitch clock. You actually see it going in the background in center field. However, if you are pitching, that would actually show up on the bottom right hand corner right above where the innings are. But looking at how Franchise is played, SDS said they've heard a lot of feedback about wanting to actually increase types of simulations, types of, different ways to play the game instead of either playing once every 5 games, once every 10 games, or just playing every single game, because 162 games in a season is a lot. So their response was exactly this. They call them custom game entry conditions. Now, the way this is going to function is a lot like how March to October works, where instead of just picking a game, saying, do I want to play the whole thing, or do I just want to sim to a certain point and then play from there, you could actually choose what type of importance that you want to be entered into a game with. And I would assume they would have either, you can just either enter the game or continue to simulate if you don't feel like playing it. Now, in this circumstance, they actually give you like the amount of games that they would expect to be simmed, the amount of games you would expect to play, and they're kind of situation based. So, in the very high situation importance, that'd be like bottom of the 9th inning, man on second, no outs, win the game. Something like that where, especially if it's like a division race or something along those lines, that's a high importance mode where like, hey, the game recognizes, hey, this is a really good moment to play the game and progress your season. Now, they are also having a player highlight moments where, again, similar like March to October, where it's like, play with this player. If they play well, they get a season-long boost, stuff along those lines. And I do think this is a really good idea. Me personally, when it comes to Franchise, I didn't want to play every 162 games, but also at the same time, I also didn't want to sim every single game. It was kind of hard to figure out what games do I want to play. Do I want to play the whole game? Do I only want to play the last 3 innings? It was a really hard thing to figure out for me sometimes because it really wasn't engaging enough. And at least for this, for your everyday games, they probably would get simmed. However, when you're in those high importance moments, I do feel like you have a little bit more control of your team, and it feels a little bit more exhilarating to play this game, especially Franchise mode, which has been a little bit dull in previous years. SDS has also confirmed that the post-launch updates that they put for Franchise and MLB The Show 23 are returning, stuff like generational talents, late bloomers, draft lottery updates, as well as player card updates. They are bringing back the amateur draft system that they had last year, and they are going to be adding some stuff to 24 as well, which is we'll get to in just a moment. But it is good that they're adding these good features back. They did say throughout 24, what you see at launch is not going to be just what you get in the game. They are going to be adding stuff later on through the year as well, but it is good to have some quality of life features come back from MLB The Show 23. The 2 biggest changes that they're going to be making for MLB The Show 24's Franchise is improved logic for undrafted and unsigned players and improved logic for injured players. Now, this is going to be centered around the drafting. For injured players, they did state that in the thing where there was some issues in previous logic where the person would get injured, they'd fall down into a draft order, and then strictly just because of their draft positioning, they would not go to the potential that they typically would be where they weren't injured at all. This is kind of an improved logic. They said that they're going to kind of make that a little bit more dynamic, and there is going to be a possibility that even if someone does slip down, becomes injury prone, or does not become injury prone, the quality of the player that they could be is not limited. Similar to undrafted, unsigned players, I do think this is going to be kind of one of those like late bloomer type situations here where, just because you went undrafted, just because you went unsigned, that doesn't mean you're guaranteed to be a crap player. I do think that you are going to see some players come in from being undrafted, unsigned, and actually end up being future stars in Franchise that you could scout for. Another feature that they're adding is what they call the PPI list, the Prospect Promotion Incentive. Now, this is a list that you would typically see in MLB in real life. Now, this is something that's a little bit more niche and that the everyday player might not care about, but if you're a hardcore realist for a franchise, this is a list that most GMs would actually have, and depending on their performance as a rookie, as early part in their career, they would actually have certain incentives if they finish in certain places for awards. So for example, if you're a rookie, if you come in third for MVP, you're entitled to a certain incentive based off of this prospect promotion incentive. Now this list is specifically just so you could identify the players, either both in the MLB and on your team, that could be, represented for these incentives, but these incentives are being added to the game as a whole. Another quality of life feature that they are adding to franchise is the awards page on the player card. As you can see here with Christian Yelich on this awards page, any award that the player would win while they're playing or has played previously would be listed on this page, and this is something that gets continually added to as you play throughout the franchise. The last thing they mentioned about franchise is that you are able to begin a franchise from a loaded roster with injuries. So for example, I'm a Yankee fan, Jason Dominguez has started the year on the IL, Jacob deGrom, he's started the year on the IL. Any player that's beginning at that time frame on the IL, you could actually start a franchise with them existing on the IL. Typically, that's not been the case before. They were just in the game, you basically load any sort of saved or default roster, but now you're able to load a roster with injuries. Now, an unfortunate thing that is not being added to the franchise this year is that there will be no online franchise. They have not brought that back yet. I was hoping for that this year. I was hoping they'd drop a bombshell at the end of this saying that they were adding it. However, unfortunately, that is not going to be the case this year. Franchise will continue to run as an offline-only mode. I talked a lot in my last video about the Women Pave Their Way mode for Road to the Show, so I'm not going to be mentioning some of the stuff that they said in this video because it's pretty repetitive to what we already knew about the mode. But to Road to the Show in general, we are getting back the Prospect Showcase as well as the 3 games after it. So as you can see here, this is the batting practice side of the showcase. There are also fielder moments as well that feature their new quick time events depending on what it is that you're doing. I do think this is a really cool way to introduce the players for Road to the Show. I think these players, that this actually determines your base attributes depending how you perform early on. I think this is a really good idea. By the way, major bombshell, they did state that Road to the Show players, known as creative players, we call them caps, they are not able to be played in Diamond Dynasty. They've made a very big emphasis on Road to the Show and Diamond Dynasty are 2 very different modes. They are completely separate from each other, and you cannot bring a Road to the Show character into Diamond Dynasty. A lot of people like this, a lot of people don't like this. Let me know in the comments below what your opinions are. I am actually curious how many people actually like this and how many people don't. Continuing on, this is more on the presentation and graphic side. They did say that they are trying to encapsulate both the audio and the visual of key moments throughout the game. So as you can see in like a walk-off situation, the animations are a lot more fluid and a lot more realistic as to what you would actually see in real life. They did pause at a certain point in this feature premiere for all audio except for like the crowd and the PA announcers, and the audio does seem to be a lot more realistic and how you would actually feel in real life. They also said they added animations for the crowd. Kind of minor things to add into the game. However, I do feel like if you're, especially for offline modes, Road to the Show, franchise, it's all about the immersion of these modes, and I do think overall that these help. They also did update face scans today. They did release a blog with that, stating, showing the difference between the 2. They also, looks like they've updated the shadowing, the shading, and how lighting works in this game. And honestly, it looks a lot better. There are certain scenarios where, like, for example, if you have the Rogers Center where the roof is half open, half closed, the shadowing that the stadium creates, the lighting creates, actually makes the stadium look a lot better, and it looks actually pretty realistic to how it would look in real life. The colors don't really get washed out anymore like they used to, and especially the deeper colors, they do tend to hold their color a little bit better on the new shading. They also stated that the hair that they added, the fluid hair, it is a physics upgrade to this game. They've completely made that from nothing, but I do think overall that is kind of a decent thing to add just physics wise. Nothing too crazy, but it is one of those situations where if you are adding a little bit of realism to the game, obviously if you have super long flowy hair, it is going to flow if you make certain movements throughout the game. Another thing they're adding this year is the outside of the stadiums. They said they are expanding upon that. So as you can see, we're scrolling through the outsides of these fields. They do look kind of cool. I think as a presentation, as an intro to these games, this is a really unique thing to have, and I think this is it looks pretty decent in my opinion, but this is a really cool thing to kind of immerse yourself more into the game. We have Guaranteed Rate, Oracle Park, Petco Park. These are like how these stadiums actually look outside the park and what you would probably typically see on an actual broadcast going into these games. Speaking of broadcasts, they said there were 8 different presentations. They are having, they call them regional presentations. So, for example, let's say you're playing as the Mariners. They have what's called the Northwest presentation. It has its own looks, color palettes, and it would look very different compared to what you would have for the Northeast, for example. They did say for their, like, they call them the big games, all-star games, there is the typical MLB Network presentation that you would typically see, which is also what you would see online. But with that being said, that is going to be the major updates to this game that we have learned today. Leave a comment below how you feel about the caps not being able to be used in Diamond Dynasty. I'm curious what y'all's feedback for that is going to be. I appreciate you guys for watching this video, and as always, I will catch you in the next one, and I hope you have a great day.